Hey, friends! Welcome to the Self Love Strong podcast. Today we have an incredible guest, Tamika Quinn, a two-time stroke survivor who defied the odds against her defy the odds, regained her health, and now speaks across the country about heart disease, stroke prevention, and childhood obesity. Tamika's journey is a testament of power, faith, and resilience, and the determination to overcome adversity. She is also a published author, business mentor, and national spokeswoman for the American Heart Association, and also the founder of G.L.A.M Girl Inc. Through her work, she empowers women and children to take control of their health and well-being. Thank you so much, Tamika, for being here.
Thank you.
Man, Tamika, your story is truly inspiring. Surviving 2 strokes, and being told that you would never walk again, but proving them all wrong. Can you take us back to that moment when you were told you wouldn't walk again?
Yeah, I was 27 years old. And at 27, I would have never in a million years thought that I would suffer a stroke, let alone 2 of them, 3 days apart. But I had recently delivered my youngest daughter. So it was actually 10 days after having her. I developed preeclampsia during that pregnancy. I'd never had high blood pressure prior to that. And my OB doctor told me it'll go away once you have the baby. And that wasn't the case for me. My blood pressure continued to rise after I delivered my daughter. And I actually had to stay an extra day in the hospital. So 10 days after having her, I woke up at home with the worst headache I'd ever had in my life. It literally felt like an elephant was sitting on my head. And I started to have classic symptoms of stroke. One side of my face drooped, the massive headache, my vision started to become blurred. But at 27 years old, I never connected those symptoms with stroke. In fact, that never even crossed my mind. And so that evening, my husband, who was alive at the time, took me to the emergency room. And I just remember this overwhelming feeling as I was walking through the emergency room doors that I was not going to leave that hospital. I passed out once I got inside. I peed on myself as well. When I woke up, it was 3 days later. I had lost 3 days that I have no recollection of. I'd had a bleed on the right side of my brain. That stroke left the entire left side of my body paralyzed. And those doctors did not have a good prognosis for me at all. I can remember being told, you're never going to walk again. You'll need assistance for the rest of your life. And 3 days after waking up, I actually had a second stroke in the frontal lobe of my brain. And so on top of physical challenges, I then had cognitive challenges and memory issues. And I mean, it seemed like it was getting worse and worse. However, I never believed the doctors when they would come and bring their negative news. It was just like, I'm not going to believe that. That's not what God has for me. And I continued to believe that I would get better. I can tell you that even though I spent 3.5 weeks in ICU, I probably fell out of my bed at least 5 times trying to walk. And so I always say to people, if you're not determined where you can't walk, but you're going to still try, you're not determined enough. Yeah.
Wow, Tamika, that is just truly inspiring. I'm thinking about 27 years old. You're having your first child, which for most people is the most joyous moment. You're having a baby, and to think about how everything just switched so crazy. It was, man, it's just, I'm like, wow.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, it was very different back then. There was no FaceTime or Skype or anything like that hadn't been created yet. And so, most people just kind of think the worst of my situation was not being able to walk or control my body. But the worst of my situation was not being able to see my children, because children cannot come into ICU. Yeah. My mother snuck my youngest daughter into the hospital to see me during that 3.5 week time twice under her clothes, because mentally I was losing it that In my mind, my baby wasn't going to remember I'm her mother.
Mm,
You know, I want to see her with my own eyes. I mean, it was just a lot to deal with.
mm, man, wow. And just what was one of those most challenging part of that recovery, and how did it? I mean, I know you were talking about I just kept believing I was getting out of my bed. When even when it felt impossible, what kept you motivated through
I'm
all
going
of
to tell
that?
you, through it all, I believe that what really kept me motivated was the fact that my doctors didn't think it was possible. And I serve a God that's so good. All things are possible. And I just had
Yes.
this determination that because you're telling me I can't, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I had therapy every day. It was either physical therapy, occupational therapy, or speech therapy, because I certainly didn't talk like this. But I was in constant motion to get back to this state. And I think as I talk to stroke survivors from all over the country, sometimes we can get to a place where we believe what's being told to us and we accept that, and our body will agree with that. But I never agreed
Mm,
with that. What was an agreement in my mind was that I would get better, that I would walk, that I would run, and my life would be just as it is today.
man, that is beautiful. I love the fact that you said I went to action. I think many times when you feel like anybody in that situation, you're in a hospital, you don't really know what's going on. The doctors, you said, couldn't give you a proper prognosis, so you're just sitting there, and it's easy to take their word for it. But I love the fact that you said, like, I know I serve a greater God, but I know even more so that I believe in myself and that I can keep, doing what my part, like showing up, like you said, I wasn't just stagnant. I was going to try to push forward however I can, is still believing. I think that's so powerful just in itself, because that's a rough thing to do when you're in the deep water. It's hard to find your way out, but I love how you talked about it's your belief and it starts with you. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I think so many times too, we got to see it, before we really believe it. And I saw myself regular back to where I was before that incident took place. I continued to visualize where it was that I was going to go, not visualizing where I was, but where I'm trying to get to.
Man, I love that. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So how would you say somebody that's stuck in that position, how were you able to set your mind on the future that you saw for yourself? Because I know when you're in that murky water, when you're in that situation, it's almost hard to look past it. But what really helped you kind of see that bigger picture?
I think I've always thought like that. I think I'm going to tell you, I grew up in North Philadelphia. It is by all accounts the hood. And my grandmother used to clean, I would say, suburban families' homes and take care of their kids. And so when I was very young, I would go with my grandmother to these very nice communities where she would clean these homes and take care of their children. And I always saw a different world than what I lived in. And so I imagined that that is how I could live as well. And my mind was
Mm,
stretched. And so I've always been able to envision what I wanted and reach for that and achieve that. It's not foreign to me. And so I think that mindset plays such a huge role in anything, whether it's positive or negative. What we think is what we are able to do and achieve.
wow. I love that. I love that. Seeing the possibility in that situation. I mean, that's just so powerful, especially when you're in, like you said, like, so how would somebody maybe in that situation, like, so did you surround yourself by people who are in a healthier state, would you say? Or like start looking at people, like I would look at your story like, hey, if I'm in this situation, I'm gonna look for those success stories through the challenge that I may be going through to help me see that other side. I think that's so awesome.
I think it's so important that that's key. You do have to look for those success stories. And I'm actually compiling a book of those success stories of stroke survivors, because oftentimes, and even in my situation, I can remember saying to one of my doctors, I think I can get better. I don't think that what you're saying is actually accurate. And he said, what makes you think that? And I said, well, there was this Olympian. He had a stroke and then he recovered and he wound up running in races again. And he said to me in a like very condescending manner, that is not likely. That may have happened for him, but that is not a likely situation. And so just having those faces that look like you to see that they actually made it, they overcame it. And even if their overcoming wasn't walking again or living independently, there's some aspect of their stroke recovery that is inspiring to someone else. And so compiling these stories of stroke survivors is definitely a priority for me at this point, because I want people to be in a space like when I was in ICU and had nothing to hear but these negative prognosis. I had no one to point to and say, well, in this book on page 46, this lady, she did it, or this guy, he made it. I don't have that right now, but that's a tangible thing that I'm putting together.
And I really love that, making that highlight reel for you. So I know you're using your story to educate and prevent stroke and heart disease and childhood obesity. What was that turning point when you decided to speak out and spread awareness? And how are you work with schools and organizations and even public impact? How are you doing that?
Sure. So, most people just think that once I had these strokes and my recovery sparked me to change my lifestyle. That's not what sparked me to change. In fact, after I recovered, I didn't change anything. I continued poor eating habits. I had a very sedentary lifestyle. And it wasn't until 5 years after having the stroke that my middle child, she was 8 years old at the time, she was diagnosed with severe high cholesterol and obesity. That is when the shift took place, because I went into mama bear mode to save my daughter. And I've been on a mission ever since. I took nutrition classes. I joined parent-child groups to learn the ways to change our lifestyle at home, our eating habits, teach my kids, how to read labels. I mean, everything about changing how we viewed food. And from there, people would ask, how did you have so much success with your daughter? How are you having success? And so from there, it started this ripple effect of writing my first book, Change Your Mind, Change Your Waistline, to speaking, to volunteering with the American Heart Association and getting involved in a legislative process, actually through the American Heart Association as well.
Oh, wow. That's so awesome. I think that's the thing that, I love how, you said initially you're like, hey, I went healthy right after that challenging situation, but it's really seeing it in somebody else. Like you're like, I don't want to have somebody go through that same challenge that I went through if I know what can prevent it. And I think many times we find ourselves in that place that sometimes you need to use that other inspiration from other people that can still push us forward to living healthier lives. I love the fact that you really hone that with your kids. And I think the best example is action. It's easy to say, hey, I need to eat healthy. Hey, I need to do this. But it's like when you saw it, was one of the ways you modeled it for your kids, would you say?
I was so intentional. And, we set parameters. I started to throw out foods that weren't healthy and making this what my kids call the switch. But I still had to control outside of our home. So I remember when I said we're no longer eating school lunch, I was going to prepare their lunches for them to take to school. But then it came a time when, they would be at grandparents' houses and grandparents are frying chicken, eating macaroni and cheese. I mean, just things that were not healthy. And as I had those conversations with grandparents, they're older and they're in their ways. And it was like met with total resistance. Well, you can't tell us what to do in our house. And if they come here, they're going to eat what we're eating. And so I actually had to put my foot down and stop my kids from visiting grandparents' houses for a while, until they could buy into what we were doing and why. And it took some months for them to make that change in their homes for our kids.
Man, I love that. I love, because it really takes somebody putting their foot down, and it's especially when it's not coming from a malicious place, it's coming from a place of love, because you're not doing anything that's going to hurt them. It's really going to help them, right? Yeah. And I think, like you said, from that, we tend to get stuck in our old ways and just hope things get better. But I love the fact you said, hey, I took action and I spread that message by modeling it in my own home. And I think that's a power sometimes we give away as adults, as parents, is, we send them to school, get the school lunch. But I love the fact that you took the power back and said, hey, I'm going to give you guys the healthier option, not so much looking for convenience, but I'm looking for much for care, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. That is so awesome. So you focus on educating the public, especially the minority communities, which I believe we need the most knowledge in, about heart disease, stroke, and obesity prevention. Why do you feel that it's important to focus on these issues, and how do you approach this conversation just that inspires change to people? Like, how did you come in with your parents, somebody who is stuck in their ways, hasn't seen anybody maybe model that for them in their lives? How do you import that impact into their lives?
I'm going to tell you that when people see you change, that's the inspiration. We can talk all day about what we need to do, what we should do. But when they see the actual change, like when my daughter and I started losing weight, my family was like, what are you doing? Tell us, And so I think it was the progress, and it took a while. It wasn't an overnight thing.
Yeah.
But when they started to see the progress and then see that we were truly intentional, this is not something that we're just fly by night doing it and then stopping. They saw us for the long haul. I have a cousin who implemented change. He reversed his diabetes. Both of my mom and my mother-in-law both started to eat differently and lost weight. I mean, it was really, truly a ripple effect. But when I go out into the communities and share, it's mostly because the Black community is affected more than any other ethnicity with heart disease and stroke. And all strokes are 80% preventable. And so if we can just tap into that awareness and education, we can definitely bring our numbers down. We can increase the number of people who are preventing heart disease and stroke just by education alone.
Man, I 100% agree with that. I think education is something we truly miss. We have, I feel, taken society's word for it, or what we've been told, like, this is just good for you. Just eat this, eat that, but not really, like you said, getting that information. But I love something you truly said, is I think many times we're wanting people to get better themselves, but we're not necessarily doing the work ourselves. I love something you said, it's funny when you jump in a fitness program, it's not an overnight process, but every time you keep showing up, it not only gets better, but you start to build that momentum. People see that your commitment is true. I think many times they're like, hey, you need to change your life. But they're like, you used to look the same, But then when y'all showed up, you know what I mean? But then they're like, hey, she it's working, Then everybody's like, I want what you got. Let's do what you did. So I love the fact that you realize that change is going to be hard for the people around me. But if I keep showing up, I realize that change I have to follow. Because like you said, it's like once people see that work you're putting in and how committed you are, they buy in.
Yeah, for sure. I just did a talk a few days ago, actually, for the NAACP in Virginia Beach. And I had all the different types of salts on display. And, from regular iodized salt, sea salt, pink Himalayan. So, I mean, every salt that there was, seasoned salt. And when I polled the room about who thought that this salt is more healthy than this salt, the majority of the people believe that different types of salts are more healthy than other types of salts. And when we flip the bottles to the back and look at the nutrition label, the nutrition facts, it's all the same. It's all the same. It all has the same amount of sodium in the salt. And so, again, education is key. And oftentimes we may get caught up in marketing and, how these companies are representing their brands, but we have to look at the labels and know for ourselves what we're actually eating.
Yes, I love that. I love that you're talking about that, because I think that's where we, like you said, it comes down to education. You don't know what you're putting in. You don't really know what you're going to get out of it. But I love that analogy. I mean, that's crazy. It's for a long time. I got to be honest. I was like, sea salt's the best. It has more minerals. But like you said, at the end of the day, it's still sodium. Salt is salt wherever you get it from. And you got to think about it. You got to think about how many other things we're just looping in there. Like, this is healthy, but we're not really doing our due diligence and doing the work.
Yeah.
You've made an incredible transformation on your own, losing over 80 pounds and helping your daughter overcome obesity and self-esteem. How does that fat girl to girl inspire other women and children to take control of their health?
I think just through the workshops and conferences that we've had over the years, when people see your progress, that alone is inspiring, because now they can identify with someone that looks like them, that's in their same age group, that may have had similar challenges. And now they actually realize, hey, I can do that too. If she did it, I can do it. And that's what it's really about.
Yeah, I love that modeling. And I think that's the best thing, because I know many times when you're struggling with something, we tend to isolate, right? When you're really struggling, try to go and maybe do this by myself, or let me do it in the comfort home. But I really love the fact that you're bringing people that had this similar challenge together. And I think there's something more powerful, like, when you come in a group of people, like you said, that look like me, that are going through the same challenges as me, and we realize that even though it's hard, we can still do it together, and you start to see people getting progress. I think there's nothing more powerful than that. I love that you building a program like that.
Thank you.
I think that's so awesome. So what really inspired you when had that first moment where you're like, I need to make something like this? Was it come back to, like, how did you feel like you needed some people around you when you first were in Journey?
I think people were wanting it from me even prior to me starting. Just because of the success of my daughter. Yeah, I think it was more, I would get asked so often, tell me exactly what you're doing. Tell me how to do it. And then it became this kind of, spoken, not spoken coaching. And it was like, okay, instead of me just talking, having this one conversation over and over, I'll do it in a group setting. And then it became individual setting. It was kind of, I was kind of pushed into it.
I love that. Sometimes fate, the universe has its ways. God is like, hey, these people need it. And you're like, I can't keep saying this over again.
Even with my speaking.
I want to hear. I'm sorry.
Yeah, even with my speaking, that was never planned either. A friend of mine had actually invited me to a jazz stroke brunch because I'd had a stroke or 2 strokes before. And I went to the event just thinking, are they going to have good food? And she's like, oh, yeah, it's catered. And, that was my only concern. I went there as a guest, and their keynote speaker didn't show up. And so I remember they were about to start serving the food, and she comes to me and she says, Tamika, the speaker didn't show. And I'm like, oh, wow, what y'all gonna do? Like, it was the furthest thing from my mind to assist. And so she said, do you mind sharing your story? And that was the first time I'd ever gotten on a stage to share my story. And up until that point, I didn't even really talk about having strokes. Like, I'd gone through that. I'd helped my daughter lose weight. I'd lost weight, but I'd never talked about it, only to people who wanted to know. And so I get on the stage. There's probably about 200 people in the room, and I'm not afraid to speak. My background is in training and development, but I'd never packaged my story in a way to speak to a crowd of people. And so that day when I shared my story, people were literally running up to the stage to give me a hug. And the folks who were there from the American Heart Association were like, we want you to work with us. And that was actually when my journey began with the American Heart Association.
Wow. Talk about divine appointments. You were just there for a good lunch.
Yes.
Oh man, how awesome is that? I love hearing stories like that. So what would you say to someone? Like, what steps can someone take to start making change in their life if they're struggling with something like this?
I think the very first thing that someone should do is take inventory of where they are. Oftentimes we will jump right into some change, but we don't even have a starting point. And if you think about anything that requires repair, is always an inspection done first before anything else happens.
Yes.
And so I always encourage people to document for like 3 days everything that you're eating, everything that you're drinking, so that you have a blueprint of where you're starting from. You don't know what to change if you don't even know where you are. And after doing that inspection and really seeing, and if you could count the calories as well, that would be awesome. But really seeing what your starting point is, now you can make a goal. Now you can set this goal to move towards. Sometimes people don't have a goal, and it's almost like driving cross country without a GPS. You want to have that goal set. What am I reaching for? Is it weight loss? Is it to reduce my blood pressure? Is it to reduce my cholesterol? What's your goal? Why are you doing this? And then write out your why. Why is this so important? Because that why, for me, it was all about saving my daughter's life. I felt like if I didn't make a drastic change, she was going to experience the exact same things I did. And I didn't know if she could survive that. And so my why was about my daughter. You want to tap into your why, because there's going to be days that you don't feel like doing what you said you're going to do. Yeah. But that why is going to always remind you to go back to it and why it's so important.
Yes, that is so powerful to me, man. I love that. I love how you really said most people don't know where they're starting. I think that's the most important part. I think that's a number one reason why people find themselves feeling stuck, because they wanted to make the change, right? So now they're going to the gym, but they haven't addressed the area that they really need to change because they never knew where they were at. I think that's like you said, if you don't know where you're at, you really will never know where you're going. But I love something that, like you really said, there's identifying your why. I think many times we're doing it for someone else's reason, but not really for ours. So when we lose that motivation, those people aren't cheering us on. Like you said, those hard days come, we fall back to the old way because we don't really know why we're doing it. But I love how you talk about when you establish the healthy foods, and I just want to go to takeout and get all the donuts I want. I know my why things. I think I really love that. It's a great place to start with any goal, right?
Yeah, absolutely. With any goal.
Man, much in your life, and yet you have a thriving career as an author, a speaker, a business mentor. What do you key factor that helped you build such a confidence in yourself, and you guide others to build that same level of belief in themselves?
Well, I think when you really talk to folks and listen to what drives them, you can always help them use that to push them even more. I always say people will tell on themselves. If we listen long enough, they'll tell on themselves. And so sometimes people haven't really, tapped into themselves to realize this is why I do this way, or this is what pushes me, or this is what deters me. But the more you talk to folks and get them to open up, you'll hear it, and they will hear it as well.
It's so true. I think I love how you said people will tell on themselves, because I think it's such a powerful thing that you said there, because many times when we look for change or we're looking for the answer, side of ourselves, right?
Right.
You said, we will tell them ourselves. Are we asking the proper questions? Are we getting guidance like you're talking about, and just talking with someone to really identify? So awesome.
What's interesting, I often ask people to talk about their goal. Where do they see themselves? And not just seeing themselves, but like really envisioning it and writing it out. What do you smell in this space? What do you see in this space? What are you wearing? Is there music playing? Do you hear other noises? Talk about that space so that they can literally envision themselves in their goal, where they're trying to get to, and keep that thing there. Keep your mind in that place to move you closer and closer to it. And I think so many times I talk to folks, they've never envisioned their goal. They may talk about, this is what my goal is, but have you ever really saw yourself there? And that's key.
Wow. I like that. So really getting into the details, not getting very detailed. How do I feel? So, okay. So really getting deeper into your goal. Be more specific. Is that what you just say? Is that be more specific about what you want?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. I like that. I like that. Being specific.
Yeah.
You said, yeah. Okay. Okay. So nutrition and exercise have played a key in your personal transformation. Can you talk a little bit more about how eating habits and incorporating exercise contributed to your success?
Oh, absolutely. So we gave up, I think the first thing we gave up was pork, then beef, now chicken. I'm a pescatarian. And so some of the foods that I used to cook were very unhealthy, and bread with every meal. I mean, it was no accident that I was overweight and that my daughter was overweight as well. That was clearly what was going to happen the way I used to cook. But I don't cook like that anymore. And we cut out sodas and sweetened beverages and bread. I think that, and we exercise regularly, but I think that oftentimes people don't know where to begin. And that was where I was at 27. I was already overweight. Even though I just had a baby, I was overweight prior to even getting pregnant. But when I decided that I was going to make a change, I didn't know where to start. And so there's so much information online. You don't actually have to seek out a nutritionist. But to be honest, most medical insurance companies will cover you seeing a nutritionist or a dietitian. And so a lot of people are not aware that that is just another specialty doctor that your insurance will cover. And so if you ask, sometimes your insurance may require a referral from your primary care doctor. Some insurances don't even require that. But you can learn. And that was where I was. I didn't know what changes to make, but I sought out the education. And I learned from various places about nutrition. And the size. I'll tell you this much. If you look at the palm of your hand, that is a serving size. And I didn't know that. I remember when I learned that, I thought, I'm eating like maybe 3 servings, of rice, or my palm, maybe that's like 3 servings of potatoes. Like, I didn't know that my palm of my hand was a serving size. But that's the type of thing that you learn when you learn about nutrition, as well as what foods to stay away from, and what foods you should eat.
Man, I love that, because I love how you're talking about nutrition is a learned thing. And I think many times we feel like, well, I've been eating this forever, and this is what they told me was good. But I think it's like we tend to fall back into our old habits. But I love the fact that it can be learned. I think many people, like, that's just what they do. They've always eaten healthy. But I love that journey. Like you said, it's a learned thing. It was a process. It didn't happen overnight. But you realize, like, it some of the things, some of the healthier foods, and eliminating some of the ones that weren't healthy anymore, the ones that weren't serving us. And I know many times it can be very overwhelming when it comes to nutrition. It sounds like it's science and it's overcoming, but I love that you said we have technology now. And that's even cooler. I didn't know you could even possibly meet with a nutritionist, but like you said, we have technology. You can do your research, and that nutrition can be a learned skill, not something that's out of your wheelhouse. It's just something we have to learn.
Yeah. And also I think too, we have to break away from those old habits, because oftentimes I will hear people say, oh, diabetes runs in my family. No, it's not diabetes that runs in your family. It's habits that run in your family. And so if grandma cooked and ate the same way that your mom does, and then you and your children eat that same way, that is what is hereditary. Those habits. What are you eating? How are you getting movement in your body? And I'll even share for the folks who don't really go out so much, who may stay home quite often. I always recommend, when the commercials come on, walk up and down the stairs while the commercials are on. Have some canned goods by the sofa. Lift some canned goods. You can get exercise in wherever you are. And I'll tell you that I just saw a study that showed that even to lower your blood pressure, like say you have a spike in blood pressure, just doing some physical activity can bring your blood pressure down. And so exercise is great for so many reasons.
Yes, I love that. I love that you talked about, we can just incorporate exercise where we can, but something so powerful there. Many times, like you said, it's diabetes or something runs in my family, or, high blood pressure runs in my family, but they never really talk about the habits. I think that's so powerful that many times we give our habits away, or we take someone else's habits that really aren't serving us. But I love how you talked about, hey, it's not the a hereditary thing. It's the fact that somebody's habits and calling it what it is, and not making that change. I think we tend to give our power away to a diagnosis instead of taking our power back and taking their actions to take ownership. I think it's so awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And
so
I think
Tamika,
that's
G.L.A.M Girl Inc. Yeah, no, you're good. No, you want to hear what you guys say. Sorry.
I think it's powerful when you can be that change in your family, when you can decide, okay, this is going to stop with me. It's not going to continue, after this. And you can be that change, and not only change you and your future family's well-being, but to also inspire the older generations. They're looking at us, they know that we had more access to information than they did years ago. And so you can be that change for your family, for your lineage, as well as your ancestors.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I think that's an awesome opportunity too, right? That's to be the greatest gift you ever give. Like you said, your family. Imagine being the one who said, no longer are we going to hold on to these old habits that no longer serve us, but we could remove some of these generational type of illnesses that we've been going through. I think that's so awesome. We want to talk about G.L.A.M Girl Inc. and your impact. G.L.A.M Girl Inc. is an incredible initiative that, you've co-founded with your daughters. How does this organization disease, obesity, and how is it empowering young girls and women to live healthier lives?
Well, G.L.A.M is really doing some big things now. I'm excited. We're 501c3, and we have been working on possibly getting legislation here in Virginia for a sodium warning label. Now, I worked on this project in Philadelphia with the American Heart Association, and they actually had a bill passed. And so right now in Philadelphia, if you go to a restaurant, you will see a warning label for foods that have high sodium in them on the menus, which is a big deal because now it gives people awareness and allows them to make an informed decision about the foods that they're selecting. We want that same legislation here in Virginia. We really want that same legislation across the board in all 50 states. But we're working on it for here in Virginia, and I'm excited that G.L.A.M is a part of that.
Man, that is a beautiful initiative in itself. Because I think that so many times, like you said, we're told that we have healthy salts and stuff, but I think that's the hardest part about why I do like the benefit of when you are able to cook, because you give that power away of what really they're putting in your food. Like, you really can't control your salt when somebody's making it for you. And I love the fact that you are giving people more awareness of what they're eating. Like you said, look at those, read those nutritional charts, make yourself more knowledgeable about what you're putting in. I love that. Love that. So, you've authored some awesome books. I want to cover your books as well. Change Your Mind, Change Your Waistline, and you co-authored Women Behind the Mask. Can you tell us a little bit more about these books and what readers can expect from them? And also tell us about your new book.
Well, I'm excited. Change Your Mind, Change Your Waistline is probably the most popular book because people who hear me speak, that's the book that they are interested in, losing weight. But the other one, Woman Behind the Mask, that book is pretty old. I don't even remember what year that I did that one. It was an anthology with several different women's stories, and I talked about my experience on September 11th in that book and how that impacted our family. But yeah, I just released a coloring book that has melanated characters. It's a nutrition coloring book for kids, helping them make better food choices. And it's really a fantastic coloring book. If you're looking to try to implement more healthy foods into your child's life, this is a fun, friendly way to do that, to start to introduce vegetables. A lot of people don't even feed their children vegetables because they didn't eat vegetables. And so this is a good start to being able to do that. And it's called Color Me Healthy.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, I saw that book, Color Me Healthy. I think that's a great way. Because we and the kids, who doesn't like? I like coloring. You're right, but it's just a great way to teach them that when they start seeing people like themselves and identify people that you're like, hey, this is me in a coloring book, and we eat healthy food. I think it's, like you said, being able to see yourself. I think that's an important thing. Like you said, it's being able to see yourself in that person, eating healthy, choosing healthy options.
Yeah.
Wow. So for women who are facing health challenges such as obesity, blood pressure, or feeling discouraged or overwhelmed, what would you say to someone to encourage them to take that first step towards change?
I would say the first thing they should do is make an appointment with their doctor, because everyone does not experience obesity for the same reason. There could always be some underlying issues. Sometimes folks have thyroid issues or just other issues in general that can be contributing to weight gain. And then if there's an actual problem, you want to get that addressed. And so I would say make that appointment with your doctor first. And from there, those three things that I talked about before, that's part of the inspecting everything. But then making your goal and writing down your why.
Man, I love that. Simple, effective, and powerful. I love those steps. I think it just removes the guesswork and gives the opportunity to know exactly where you're at. Man, Tamika, your story has been truly amazing. Just you're doing so many amazing things of impact. For listeners who want to make change in their own health and lifestyle, where's somewhere that they can connect with you or, maybe collaborate with you?
Yeah. And so my website is tamikaquinn.com. But I do have coaching, and that is at dreamgiversacademy.com, dreamgiversacademy.com. And we can always connect through social media. All of my social media handles are author Tamika Quinn.
Awesome, Tamika, man. Your story is truly impactful. Your mission is impactful. And I'm excited to see where Glam Girl goes and your story continues to impact others. I'm super thankful for this opportunity to be here, you guys. But I'm going to remove the guesswork for you. So I'm going to get all of Tamika's links. I'm going to put them right under here. Her links to her coach, her links to Glam Girl, her links to just connect with her on social as well. I mean, you see somebody that's struggling with some of the very things that we talked about today. Know that there's somebody out there that really cares, that's willing to help them. So I'm going to use those links. Don't let this be the only time you hear from Tamika. Connect with her and not only share her message with people that are maybe going through those same challenges. Let her lesson be that lesson that they can be like, they can see that possibility through her as well. Thank you so much for your time, Tamika. Your story is impactful. And thank you for continuing to spread your message.
Thank you.
All right, friends, y'all take